Then we gotta, we do.
Not central.
You don't have to, but you had to start at 9:30.
Right. Make sure everybody signs in if they will, or has signed in. Gonna run a few minutes late, waiting on Carl. He got hung up in construction traffic, sounds like, so. Which is common this time of year, I think, you know. Farming season, construction season, you know, kinda go hand in hand.
Yeah. For some reason, we gotta have that construction before we can have maintained roads. Nobody likes road construction, but.
Supposed to be good in the end, it's just
Right. You hope it's better than
the point in between.
Yeah.
Got anything?
I didn't get the back row.
That's okay. I think everybody else but Richard signed in.
So maybe just to cover the formalities, this is a special session. This session was put in place based on communication with, I want to say all of the commissioners, but all of the commissioners except for Commissioner Meads, who I was not able to reach. However, the consensus was by all of the commissioners to set this for a special session today, which is what is required. Notice was sent out on Friday, so I don't think notice is an issue. And there is a single topic on the agenda. That's the only thing that can be covered today. It has the caveat that if an executive session is needed, then that's the only reason why it's listed. The executive session may or may not occur depending on what Dr. Wyatt wants to talk about. As this involves the EMP Shield CHIPS application, there may be some subject matter that cannot be discussed in the open due to requirements related to the CHIPS application process with the U.S. Department of Commerce, but it may not happen. It just depends on where Dr. Wyatt wants to go. So I think we're just waiting for him, and
No, we're ready. Buddy brought popcorn.
you got chips back there.
We do have leftover chips from yesterday, don't we?
A couple bags put in there somewhere. Did not know you were spending the evening with us, well.
I did not know either. Carl said, "Hey, you sticking around? Can you join me for the meeting with Coffee County?" I said, "Absolutely." So after this, we'll be heading over to the capital, state Kansas, and meet with Commerce,
Right.
see what they can do to help out. So happy to help in any way.
Appreciate it.
Very good.
So you said yesterday on the way down you were noticing deer.
Oh yeah,
You a hunter or?
I'm not actually. No, I'm not much of a hunter, but I did do a body count of deer along on the road here, and I made sure to keep an eye out for any deer on the way back and the way down. After seeing so many of them, like, good Lord, these guys must just be running around like crazy.
They do. They move all the time anymore. Used
Yeah.
to be just rut season, you know, in the fall and winter. Anymore, you've really got to watch out for the deer. I wasn't kidding yesterday.
Oh, I know.
When, I think it was last week or the week before, every accident in the paper was a deer accident. Every one of them, there was a list like this. No.
So in Arizona, not necessarily in Phoenix within the city limits, but northern Arizona, there's a lot of deer crossing. So they do a pretty good job at channeling and diverting,
Sure.
you know, the animals, so that they're animal crossing. But here it's wide open. They're just free to roam and run, right?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Population control, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Our insurance companies love deer, don't they?
Yeah, job security for the auto industry.
No, they do
I
not.
imagine there's a county preferred vendor for deer removal and deer retrieval. That must be a pretty good contract to bid on every year.
Right.
Body shops.
Yeah, and the body shops as well.
Insurance agents.
Yeah,
Not
right.
like deer.
The deer recovery guy owns the body shop. How's that work?
There's no conflict there.
Yeah.
Out in the field, scared them on the highway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a smart man right there.
My granddaughter hit two of them here about 2 weeks ago, $9,000. It fixed up.
It's just,
I know we can't talk about it now, according to what Wade said, but next time maybe we can discuss moving those deer crossing to a better spot in the road.
yeah.
The signs?
Yes.
You think they read the signs?
Give them a
They
button to
must be.
push. Yeah, that's what's missing is a button to push. So you
I was
can
looking
traffic
for that
control.
engineering.
Yellow light that would flash.
We could do a study if you'd like.
Just a slightly phenomenal feat.
Right, we'll do a deer traffic study.
I always thought they should be born with a neon stripe on them, you know, so you could see them in the dark would be really beneficial.
Absolutely.
There's no name Rudolph, we'd have him made.
Right.
Amazes me where you can actually, you know, see where a deer tried to cross a highway in a certain area. It's like, why would they even be there, you know? Especially when they got the concrete buffers out there.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like 3 lanes of traffic on each side.
Yeah, they're jumping the median.
Yeah.
How do they get up there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was left my office to come to work at the courthouse the other morning, and they were in a yard north of the library. 2 or 3 does just standing out there eating grass.
They run that creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to, when I go to Phoenix, though, I like some of the neighborhoods you go in, and the quail are running around.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In the yards.
Yeah.
I like that.
The quail run free, road runners run around.
Yeah.
We've got a property in Buckeye, my wife and I, surrounded by farmland. We've got a road runner that just, I tell him we fight over who owns the property. The road runner just, when I show up, he looks at me like, what are you doing here? Yeah, we got a road runner that claims the property, we got some rabbits that run around, kids love them. And we got gophers, I can't stand the gophers. They're a nuisance.
Yeah.
So we trapped one and relocated them, but man, they just keep popping out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I try to grade the land and keep it somewhat nice and keep more holes all over the place.
Yeah.
You guys have gophers out here?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
They can do a lot of damage to the yard.
Absolutely.
There are a lot more in the western part of the state,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah.
The gophers, I believe.
Prairie dogs in the western.
Yeah, that's
Part
what I
of
was
it.
thinking of, I guess, yeah.
Cattle farmers don't like them in the western part,
Yeah.
the way I understand it. Prairie dogs dig all them holes, and cattle once in a while stick their leg in there and break it.
Indeed.
No more cow.
Yeah. It's true.
There are a lot of potholes in our lawn.
There's a place, I think it's north of Lake Pleasanton, up there.
Pleasant.
Yeah, Lake Pleasant, up there. It's like an oasis out there. What's the name of that?
A community?
Yeah, it's it's a resort area. It's got the palm trees growing, and have you been out there?
North of Lake Pleasant or west? There's Wigwam Resort that's in Litchfield Park, just west of Phoenix.
Now, this is like, my nephew took me out there, I was, maybe I just thought I was going north, Lake Pleasant, but there was this remote area, it's got this motel where people, they can get married there and have events. I mean, it's in the middle of literally nowhere. It's amazing.
There's a few of those around.
Castle Rock?
Castle Rock Spring?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep, I know exactly, yeah, that is north.
Okay.
That's quite a bit north of Lake Pleasant.
Right, yeah, we went
Yeah.
up there in one of his four-wheeler deals.
Yeah.
I forget what he's got, but anyway, yeah. You just go out there and it's, I mean, literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's not like a real road to get there. It's like
Yeah.
not even a well-maintained gravel road like you'd see here. It's just rock and somewhat desert. Sequoias growing everywhere, and all once you get to one area, palm trees and a big old motel.
Yeah.
And people, I mean, it's like very expensive to rent for your event, but it's neat as heck. But
Yeah.
you can't drive in there. You can only see it from out of the way. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
And what do you want to do?
That's for you, Carl.
I've got
So
a,
wherever you're comfortable is what
this is
we'll let you do. How's that?
that'd be fun. I've got a thumb drive for a,
That's that guy's job there. Traffic was not kind to you this morning?
well, I had a good visit with the folks at Melbourne Lake.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Had a meeting there first thing this morning.
Oh, Rural Water 12.
Yes,
Okay.
wholesale 12.
I was thinking some of that traffic over there is near Melbourne Lake, so I thought maybe it's
They have a temporary light because there's one lane,
Mhm.
and so they've got to alternate the traffic.
Right, right,
They're working on 3 of those bridges at the same time.
right.
Very well.
Is this the right one?
Right at the top. And then go to slideshow.
So that gets you connected. That's better.
All right. What I wanted to do is to give you an update on where we are. I understand that you've heard some things about the situation that we're dealing with, not the least of which is we have a situation where an investor who had agreed to support what we're doing has simply not come through yet. And so we're still pursuing that investor along with some other options. But our intent is to move forward with the project, and hopefully what you'll see today will give you a pretty good feel for the progress we've made, the status of the project, and what we have before you is the presentation that we are intending to give to Lieutenant Governor David Tullen. Now, there's more that I'm probably going to go through today than will be heard when I get to Topeka. But let me just get started. As you know, the project is one where we're currently now just collecting all the resources that are necessary to resolve some issues with regard to the infrastructure. Typically, when a semiconductor plant is built, particularly for those states that have been at it for a while, like Arizona or Texas or New York, the infrastructure already exists. And so that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is actually getting the plant built. And usually that plant these days is built by people who are already churning cash. Obviously that's not the case here. And so let's go to the next slide. What you see now is essentially a representation from Excite of what the site looks like on the left. This was when there was snow on the ground. This is the 265 acres that have been purchased by Coffee County. And in that building there, TEM1 is the first of 4 semiconductor plants that the site is prepared to accommodate. And if you look, you can see a little car there at the bottom to give you a feel for the scale of the size of that plant. That's what Excite has designed for this facility. And if you look at the next slide, the next block there to the right, you'll see that that's TEM1, and then TEM 2, 3, and 4 are just like it. Each one of those buildings is about 400,000 square feet, so that the total build-out, when the whole site is done, will be about 1.6 million, so actually a little over that. And that's without any of the other KSMC buildings that'll be on the site. So what you don't see are the daycare, the training center, and a number of the other elements that are required to host this economic development for Coffee County. Next slide, please. What I wanted to do is to give you just a couple of bullets on the unique edge that Kansas has established with this site. The first fact is that the United States is trailing the international competitors when it comes to compound semiconductors in general and gallium nitride in specific. How bad is it? Well, the number 1 firm, Innoscience, is currently expanding their site. They have 10,000 wafers a month that they're able to produce. They've been at this now since 2015. So we're trying to make up essentially almost a 10-year stagger. And it turns out that next year, they're expanding their facility to accommodate 70,000 wafers a month. They're building gallium nitride, and the biggest issue there is that there was a company called EPC. It's an American company that sued them last year. They sued them for patent infringements. It turns out that it looks like the USPTO, the patent office, is saying that the patents that they're claiming are not sufficient, and they don't think they're going to win that case. And what that means is China is positioning itself to be able to flood the zone with gallium nitride that they're making. The other major supplier is Vanguard in Taiwan. They're 40% plus owned by TSMC and the government of Taiwan. But because of the instability in the area, if anything happens, then that means then that China is the only game in town except for the plant that is being designed for Kansas. So Kansas, we believe, is poised for global leadership. Even though China is making a lot of gallium nitride today, what is not known, what they don't publish, is what their yields are. So they're currently producing gallium nitride on silicon. That's a very low-cost substrate. They can use existing silicon processing equipment to make those wafers. And so they can make a lot of it. We're just not quite sure about the quality. If you'll go to the next slide. So this is what is planned for Kansas. We believe that we're on track to the highest quality wafers that can be made anywhere. Right now, the largest wafers that you'll find are 8-inch. There is a roadmap that we have to go to 12-inch wafers based on some new substrate materials that we're going to be using. We've made a decision to redirect where we were headed before, because previously the thought was to include gallium nitride on a silicon carbide substrate. That's what Wolfspeed is using. But our understanding is that Wolfspeed is really having problems with yield and wafer cracking, because that silicon carbide does not like gallium nitride. We think that that's a problem that we're going to be able to circumvent by using both silicon as a substrate and another substrate called QST that was invented by Micron. That's an American, Micron Technologies is an American memory technology, and that is a solution that has been co-developed between QST, which makes this new, Chromis, which makes the QST substrate, and IMEC. IMEC is the company that we're expecting to license technology from. So we believe that based on the plans for Coffee County, the amount of gallium nitride that would be manufactured now that we've made the switch from 10,000 wafers a month to 20, the production out of Coffee County will exceed all of the production of similarly produced devices on silicon and on Chromis combined. This one plant here in Coffee County just with TEM1. Next slide. We had pointed out before that Kansas is necessary to support the DoD supply chain. All of the warfighter applications, stealth jets to boots on the ground, are using communications and electronic warfare equipment that today has been transitioned from another compound semiconductor called gallium arsenide to gallium nitride. And what that means is that it's imperative to the DoD that Coffee County actually come into production. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean it's a slam dunk just yet. Thank you, sir. Next slide. So here's what we're going to be asking for from the state. Based on all the work that has been done over the last few months, and that work has been done without the benefit of any financing at all, the financing that we had thought that we were going to be able to bring to the table, it has not materialized, but that hasn't stopped the people, and you'll see the list of all the partners that have been pulled together. The team is convinced that this is an initiative that needs to go forward, and you'll see how it is that we intend to compel the Department of Commerce to make an up or down decision as to whether or not they're going to come through and finance this project. So the $22 million that we're looking for from the state is to take a plan that has now been developed and actually make the site shovel ready based on the engineering that would be performed with that $22 million ask. Now the good thing about that is that the way the site itself is being planned, any developer would be able to take advantage of this approach. In other words, the infrastructure, since it doesn't exist today, all the planning that we've done provides water, electricity, and gas, and all the work that has been planned in terms of the site preparation. Once the engineering is done for those areas, you have an infrastructure shovel-ready project that can be built to support any developer. And that's important because this region, centered around the current location for the plant, within a 50-mile radius, you're looking at 400,000 Kansans. So that's not only Coffee County, but some of the surrounding counties would benefit, and that is typically what happens in any semiconductor plant that is built in the United States. That the people that benefit from that plant are not only the folks that are local, but others in the state. And so this becomes, we believe, a regional imperative for the state of Kansas. Now, although it's true that the infrastructure plan that we have put in place would benefit any developer, the fact is that the best developer still remains the federal government. And the reason is that if you go out and look for a new developer, they're going to want to negotiate a cost share with the state on this shovel-ready design. So they have a design, it's ready to be built, but then somebody's got to have to pay for that. Whereas for the CHIPS Act, all of the cost of developing the site would actually be financed through the CHIPS Act and the financing that would be brought to the project. So we think that there are unique financial benefits to Kansas for not only allocating the $22 million for the design necessary to support the region, but it also makes good business sense because it turns out that that means that the region now is established for the kind of economic development. And that only occurred because of the investment that Coffee County has made to date in that site. Next slide. So here are the partners that have been working really hard over the last few months. Excite, of course, is the #1 manufacturer. They're the #1 construction company for semiconductor fabs worldwide. The other companies you'll recognize, I just wanted to point out a couple of them. Garney is actually working with us. In fact, I just left Garney and the good folks at Wholesale 12. They have a plan for how it is that they want to make the water available for this site. And the amount of water that's required for the plant, just the plant itself, is about 1.5 million gallons per day. But the design that has been established by Garney and also by Midwest, the Midwest Engineering Group that has done all the design, all of the engineering for Wholesale 12, is to accommodate 6 million gallons a day. So how come so much more? Because half of that is for the site. The site demand is pegged right now at about 2.3 million gallons a day, and there's another 700,000 gallons of overage. The other 3 million gallons is for the surrounding community. And one of the things that Wholesale 12 made very clear to me when we met earlier this morning is that they obviously want to make sure that the plant is successful, but they're especially interested to make sure that the surrounding communities benefit from the water that would be provided. Another thing I want to point out on this slide, you'll see that Brian Cave is not only the legal firm that we've engaged, again with no money, but the other thing is that they're providing some very vital political support, and you'll see the details as we step through this. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the breakdown of the ask. Of the 22 million, I talked about, if you look at that column all the way over to the left, the Coffee County Regional Gallium Nitride Development Project is looking for infrastructure engineering investment for power, and you'll also see fiber. Turns out that we're going to be bringing optical fiber to the site for manufacturing. That's going to be 10 gigabits, but that the optical fiber that is envisioned for the actual site when it's at full production will be 400 megabits, and that fiber broadband will be available to the community as well. That's a part of the infrastructure that will be brought in. I talked about the gas, and I'll tell you why it is that the gas that's being used is quite a bit more than what is required just for heating. And then we've talked about the water. The right-of-way and infrastructure issues that need to be addressed with KDOT, et cetera, will take up another 10 million, and that's where the 22 comes from. Then if you go to the column all the way over to the right-hand side, what you see are the post-award costs. So let's talk about what pre-award means, which is in the center, and post-award. The main objective that we have right now is to get what's known as a PMT. That's a preliminary memorandum of terms. That's what DOC issues to every one of the companies that has actually gotten cash as a result of their application. But when they issue the PMT itself is not an obligation to spend. What it means is it becomes a national announcement so that everybody then knows that the Coffee County project is being selected and interviewed in detail by DOC for a funding decision. And that funding decision comes out as a result of what's known as a due diligence process. It's a comprehensive process where they go through the entire project in excruciating detail. And the purpose of that process is to end up with an up or down decision on whether or not they're actually going to make funding available. And so that's all pre-award. The 22 million that we're asking for the state, that's pre-award money. And again, that's to do the engineering to implement the plan that has already been developed that I just described for the infrastructure. The post-award is the investment that will be made to actually begin the construction, the build-out on the site. And that post-award money is paid not by the state, but that's paid by the project. So the government funding that is currently identified is less than half of the total funding required. Another large chunk of that is going to be bond and equity money that is raised by Raymond James, and then there is the dollars that have been committed, or the funding that's been committed by the state and the county. So that post-award investment is investment that is made, again, not by the state, but it is driven by the award decision. That's if the award decision is thumbs up. We don't have that yet. We don't even have the PMT. So I recently saw, looking at some of the things I didn't really appreciate about D-Day, but there are photographs that were taken of Rangers that were scaling a vertical cliff, and it was vertical. Most of those Rangers didn't make it, but that didn't stop them from taking on the challenge. It had never been done before. You may be aware that the landing craft that was used to hit that beach, was a new development. Those landing craft had never been used before in a combat situation. The reason I bring that up is that's not unlike Collier County. You folks have taken a risk with the taxpayers' confidence to essentially drive an economic development that otherwise could not happen in Kansas. But there's more that I'll tell you about what it is that risk entails if you'll go to the next slide. So this is a build slide. This is part 2. This is our ask number 2. And if you just step through that, you'll get a feeling now for what it is that we've done and where we stand. Just click the button again. So right now, Garrison Holmberg, who's the Chief of Staff for Senator Moran, about a month or so ago, he and I talked, and he has the names of all of the people that we've talked to face-to-face at DOD. He wanted to go and confirm those names because, as you're probably aware, Senator Moran is on the Intelligence Committee. And if you'll click the button once again. So a month ago, a letter was written for Senator Moran and Senator Warner of Virginia. Senator Warner, of course, chairs the Intelligence Committee. Now, you'd probably ask, well, what the heck is a guy from Virginia getting involved in a project for Kansas? And it's because of that Senate intelligence focus. So when I talked about all the warfighter demand for gallium nitride, and this is in just about every electronic system that we make that has anything at all to do with electronic warfare, we believe that the Coffee County project is the best way to ensure that there is availability of gallium nitride for all of our warfighter applications. If you look at the lower right, you'll see that representatives or Congressman Jake Turner, Sharice Davids, and Emmanuel Cleaver, they've actually written a letter, and can make a copy of that available to you, that was just written and sent last week to Secretary Raimondo supporting this project. Now, previously, each of them individually had supported the project, but if you look at the letter that they wrote, they really do emphasize three things. This project is in the national interest from the standpoint of defense. It is also the only CHIPS Act initiative that is being led by rural Americans. If you look at all of the other projects, those are all plants that are being added to existing facilities where the companies that are financing them are already multi-billion-dollar operations. That's not what happened here. Now, if you look at the CHIPS Act legislation, it turns out that rural America is mentioned 22 times. This is, if you'll allow me to repeat, the only CHIPS Act that is actually being launched from rural America. Now, so then you have the House that's pinging Representative Raimondo, and we hope to get the Senate to do the same thing. And when we talk to Lieutenant Governor Tolan today, we're going to lean on him to make sure that Senator Moran and Senator Warren seriously consider, and they can modify the letter, but that letter has been in the hands of Garrison Holmberg now and Senator Moran for over a month. That letter from the Senate Intelligence Committee, we believe, is going to have impact on on Secretary Raimondo. We're not asking the letter writers to demand funding. We're only asking for the preliminary memorandum of understanding. That does not obligate the government to spend money, but it does tell the world that Coffee County now is on the map. If you'll click that next bullet. Now, the other agencies that you see across the middle there are peers to Secretary Raimondo. I'm going to come back to DOD, but you'll see DOE. We've actually reached out to a woman by the name of Mary Sotos. She runs the FEMP, the Federal Energy Management Program. Well, what does energy management have to do with the CHIPS Act? If you look at the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Building Action, the Building Action Coalition, and then just below that, you'll see a truck that happens to be a Tesla truck, and above that, the text says $65 billion public-private payload. It's a public-private partnership payload. In 2007, the federal government essentially awarded a contract facility worth $80 billion to 16 so-called super ESCOs. They are super energy services companies. That was in 2007. Of that $80 billion, $65 billion of it has been unused. We believe that the project that has been developed based on Coffee County gallium nitride offers one of the keys to putting that money to work. Well, so what? It turns out that if that $65 billion is put to work, leveraging technologies that have come out of this plant, the estimate is that the savings to the American taxpayer could be as high as $250 billion. That's enough to pay for CHIPS 1 and CHIPS 2. Now, those are not just our numbers. The fact is that DOE is aware that they've been struggling for many administrations since the Bush administration to actually put that money to work. We believe that we found a way to do that, and we believe that that way is anchored by the gallium nitride that would come out of Coffee County. And if you'll click finally once more. So this is one of the areas where I messed up. A few months ago, I went to Topeka and urged the governor to send a letter to Representative Jim Clyburn. And the governor's people, very rightly, expressed concern that such a letter could put South Carolina in a position to do what Coffee County is trying to do. And why would another state support Kansas? Well, so the idea was shut down, and what I failed to do was to be enough of a nuisance. I know that you don't see too many nuisances that come into your boardrooms, but I failed to be enough of a nuisance to insist that that get done. And the problem that that caused was that it turns out that Representative Clyburn is actually a graduate of an HBCU, South Carolina State University, SC State University. Guess who gave the commencement speech there just a few weeks ago? The Secretary Austin. Had that letter been written by the governor, I believe, in my humble opinion, that she would have had an opportunity to talk to the Secretary face-to-face about this project. Fortunately, because of our relationship with Brian Cave, we believe that we're going to get another bite at that apple. Because in the conversations that I've had with both the staff at Jim Clyburn's office and also senior members of the SC State University, First of all, SC States, they're the ones who told me that Austin was just there a few weeks ago. And they also said, we'd be delighted to be a part of this initiative, which is something that was certainly music to our ears. Now, you know, people say stuff. I've said stuff that hasn't quite panned out. But don't give up on me just yet. If you'll go to the next slide. We still think then that because of the relationship that Clyburn has with the president, everything else that I talked about, all the letters from the Senate and from the House, all the parallel communication to Secretary Raimondo from her peers on the cabinet. This would be Secretary Granholm at DOE, also Robin Carnahan, who runs GSA. Those two, by the way, are the keys to that $65 billion kingdom, if you will, because the GSA operates about 360 million square feet of real estate, and that real estate could actually accommodate technology, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So that's really our strategy for getting the attention. We want, in addition to that bottom-up approach, we'd like to move forward, and we think it's possible to get some input from the president. You say, well, isn't that unusual? Not if you listen to Pat Gelsinger at Intel. Pat Gelsinger, if you recall, was at the State of the Union address last year, and he was applauded for the investment they were making in a semiconductor facility in Ohio. So Pat Gelsinger, who I worked with and for when I was at Intel, got antsy about the fact that, look, we submitted our application months ago, we've made a multi-billion-dollar commitment to Ohio, and you guys haven't made a decision to fund our project. That sounds familiar. And so Pat is very good at pitching fits. And the fit that he pitched was, he said, you know what, that plant in Ohio, business conditions have forced us to rethink our start date for that plant. So we're going to have to slow down. And don't you know, just a few weeks later, they got a PMT. So there is precedent for nuisances at high levels, and that's kind of what our strategy is. Now, that's really the core of what I wanted to talk about. There's some stuff in the backup that I want to get to, but I'd like to give those of you who are here an opportunity to ask some questions. I'm thick-skinned, so I know that you've got some things to complain about, and I would encourage you to be just as frank and as open as your heart's desire. Now, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to keep yapping.
I think you've been very thorough in explaining where things have been coming from and where things are headed, so I'm comfortable so far. I'll let you keep gathering.
All right, thank you, sir.
I'm happy with the
So
progress.
so again, there is risk, and I would urge you, just Google D-Day. So I'm not a tough guy at heart. I cannot imagine being in the landing craft, and if you saw Saving Private Ryan, that was the first time that I realized what those kids are going through. You can see the tracers, and we had a friend in our Bible study who said, yeah, Carl, every third bullet is a tracer, and that's so that the folks who are shooting know where their bullets are going. And they chewed those kids up, if you remember. The water was red with the blood of Americans. There was no way that they should have pulled that off, but they did. And so once it became clear to me that we didn't have any money, I sort of went back and I told Pete to Isaiah 55:1, and it's a scripture that starts with there's an appeal to Israel to go and buy with no money, which sounds like a contradiction. And then it goes on to say, essentially, even if you had the money, it wouldn't be enough for what you are headed to get. Now that doesn't mean that we're not going to be among the bodies that are sort of at the base of the cliff, but at least there'll be more than one. So I'm going to ask you to go to the next page. So this is the thing that got the attention of Representative Clyburn's staff. We talked to, and they looked at the HBCUs across the bottom, and they didn't see South Carolina State. And so they said, well, before we can go any further, we want you to talk to SC State. And we had pointed out to them that I talked to you about the fact that there are rural mandates and references in the law, in the CHIPS Act legislation for rural America 22 times. 17 mentions are for HBCUs. None of the CHIPS Acts have pulled together rural America and HBCUs in order to do something that has never been done before, not only in this country, but worldwide. And the reaction that we're beginning to get from South Carolina is that this is they want to scale the cliff with Kansas. And that's sort of the thing that I think will be a shock to the folks in Topeka, because they couldn't see that another state would be wanting to help Kansas to actually get paid, and I'll show you why that's the case. Go to the next slide. So I talked about the problems that we have with power. Evergy, in order for Evergy to bring power to that site, even for TEM1, they'd have to build a 24-mile transmission line to the south, to the site, at the cost of $1 million a mile. And they said that not only is it going to cost you $24 million, but it's going to take 4 years. Well, we're obligated to have the plant up and running in 3 years. So that's a non-starter. And so what we did was we decided that, okay, rather than to force the issue, Evergy is still a partner, obviously, but we've decided that we're going to try to generate electricity on site. And the units there on the left are cogeneration units. The one in the center is sort of like you peel the skin off. And what you'll see is it's really a module. Each one of those crates will generate a megawatt of power. And for construction, we're going to put 6 of those on the site. And that's enough to start the construction within about 4 to 6 months of an award, which means then that they'll be able to start the construction right off the bat. To the right, you'll see an alternative approach, or a supplemental approach, I should say, that's been implemented by Trane. Trane, instead of using the microturbine generators, now those microturbine generators were actually co-developed between a company called Capstone and the Department of Energy. So they kind of like that, because what that means is that you're going to be building a plant where the source of power is green from the start. So when we get power typically from a carbon-fired plant, whether it's coal or oil or gas, the efficiency of that power delivery to the end user is around 30-35%. The efficiency of these cogenerators, because they not only generate electricity, but you can reuse the waste heat, is 90%. And
power?
Beg your pardon?
Power?
Natural gas.
Okay.
So when I mentioned before that we're going to need a lot more gas, that's why.
Okay.
It's because we're going to use the natural gas, but it turns out that there's something called a spark spread, which means then that you can use the energy in gas to generate electricity, and if your efficiency is high, the cost of the gas is low compared to the price of the electricity that you generate. So we believe we can generate electricity using these approaches for as little as a nickel a kilowatt hour.
So would that mean that Evergy wouldn't build the line? I mean, you would be totally dependent on this?
Excellent. Actually, they would. So what's going to happen is, in order to get the plant up and running, we need a total of 20 megawatts. Evergy can deliver 4.5 megawatts in about 6 to 12 months. And we're gonna need a total of 10 by the time that we have completed the shell. So that's that building that you saw on the outside, and we start stuffing it with all the manufacturing equipment. So that means then that in order to get to that 10 megawatt demand, we're going to use the 4.5 from Evergy and the 6 from the cogen. And then we're going to go to 20 by adding an additional power, could be reciprocating engines. The engineers are looking at a bunch of different options, but that'll take us to 20. That gives Evergy a runway. We don't need for their power to be delivered in less than 4 years, but when it is available, then we'll have that power to use for the rest of the site.
So Evergy would still be a major player there?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Pretty good.
And part of the money that we're asking for now is, I got a bill from Evergy for what it would cost to put in that 4.5 megawatts. And because we're not a customer now, we don't have an account, so it's a little tricky. They had to do some fancy footwork, but they gave us a bill, and I just said, buy with no money.
We bought it, huh?
Go to the next slide if you would. So in this slide, so this is showing the photo there from above is Malvern Lake. And what that shows is that they're going to add a new intake to provide that 6 million gallons per day. And what they told me was, I said, Carl, you know, because of the vagaries of the temperature going up and down, we've got some intakes that are above the surface of the water. That happened last year for about 30 days. And so we're going to have to, with the help of Garney, which is the nation's #1 water contractor. They're the #1 water construction company, not just for water delivery, but also for wastewater treatment. That's a big issue for us. Working in lockstep with the Midwest Engineering Group. And so then the artist conception down below shows how it is that they would expand the facility there at Malvern in order to get that 6 million gallons per day. But what they demanded was, they said, Carl, so I know you guys want water for your fab. You better make sure that you don't raise the cost of water to the customers that we're already supporting. And you have to be sure that you're not going to interrupt their service. So they know this is a big project that is roughly estimated to be north of $50 million just to do the site work there at Malvern. But that would have to be done for any developer that decides to build something in Coffee County, because there is no infrastructure here today. But the region would benefit. And then the map there, so again, you'll see Malvern Lake there at the top, and then you'll see sort of like a pink line. That's rural 3 that comes down to the KSMC site. And so then engineering is required to do the design for Malvern Lake, and to also put in the new pipe for rural 3. And this is going to have to be what's known as a progressive design build. And what that means is you don't have 100% design when you start, but the design is sort of done progressively. It has to be done that way, because otherwise it's going to take more than 3 years, and that means if we have a fab, no water, we couldn't operate. And so that's another message that will be delivered today to Lieutenant Governor Tolan.
You know, this 6 million gallon we're talking about, it is Carl, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have, you can call me other things. That
I'll get there pretty soon. Talk about 6 million gallon, and that's the information that we were provided a year ago or a year and a half ago. And then they discovered, my understanding, that a half a million gallon a day was all it's going to take, because they could refine it. I don't know what the right words are.
Recirculate.
Refine it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's
But
two
now
issues.
we're back to 6 million.
Yep, and I'll tell you why. So the original 6 million number was a guess. And then what happened was that the guess, there was an attempt to refine the guess, but that refinement had been done without input from Excite. So Excite, they know how to build semiconductor fabs, and they know how much water is required. And when Excite looked at that 500,000 gallons, they said, I'm sorry, but you're low by a factor of 3. Then you need another, 800,000 for the rest of the KMC site. So the actual demand is not 3, but 2.3. What the engineers are saying is that, hey, Carl, we're just going to expand that to 3, but that's just for the site. There's another 3 that they want to put in for the community. That's where the 6 comes from. So the actual site demand, or the plant demand, is just 1.5. There's an additional 0.8 for the rest of the KMC partners that are going to be there at the site. And then they just sort of scaled that up with a buffer. And you're absolutely right. It turns out that Excite believes that the actual demand is going to be somewhat lower when you consider recirculation. So you bring in the potable water, then you have to go through and make that what they call ultra pure for making semiconductor devices. And then that water is ejected from the site after they remove the heavy metals and the chemicals. Then it goes into a lagoon for biological wastewater treatment. But some of that water, once they've cleaned it, can be recirculated to the beginning of the plant. It's already pure, and it can be reused, so that could reduce the total demand for water. But the key point that Garney is pointing out is, Carl, you better make sure, we have to make sure that that wastewater treatment is properly sized. Because if that's not done right, if that's too skinny, then it turns out that the whole plant process goes south. And that's why it is that they decided to scale up to 3, and they're going to design the wastewater treatment to handle the 3, and then expand it for the 6.
That's good to hear.
I'm not going to go through the details there. This is all of the stuff with regard to the how the gas is going to be delivered. I didn't put the names of the suppliers. We know who they are, but then we also know that this stuff goes public, so I can't tell you unless we have a private session. And if you'll go to the next slide. So about that $250 billion, what does a city like Kansas City have to do with the CHIPS Act? So if you go back to the ESPCs, the Energy Savings Performance Contracts, that's the contract facility that is so grossly underutilized. There's $65 billion that's been sitting on the sidelines looking for something to do. It's not real money, it's opportunity. And the way it works is that the ESCO or Super ESCO would do make an agreement with a federal agency to modernize energy infrastructure. And if they find infrastructure they can modernize, the Super ESCO says, okay, we're going to modernize it, and we're going to pay for everything up front. We pay for all of the infrastructure. You just pay us from the savings. And we're going to guarantee the savings that you're going to get. If we don't hit our savings guarantee, we don't get the full price. We only get paid what we save. Well, it turns out that if all you do is replace boilers and chillers and valves and valves and that sort of thing, you only scratch the surface on the $80 billion. That's why they've only done 15. And more than half of that, or about half of that, is just for lighting, switching to LED lighting. So, and then the other problem is that if you look at a building like the HUD Weaver building, the HUD headquarters building, the air handler unit in that building, if you can stand in it and you can hear it squeaking and groaning because it's so leaky. That thing is over 50 years old. But they can't get enough money to replace it because the savings from a replaced air handler would take on the order of 100 years. Well, that's longer than you can get on one of these ESPCs. So it turns out that there's something else called a energy management control system. You have one in this building. It's a building automation system. So you don't have a bunch of, green men twiddling knobs and that sort of thing to maintain the temperature. It's all under the control of essentially an IT infrastructure. There's servers associated with it. There's cabling, the whole 9 yards, software, applications, etc. And it turns out that the building automation system, because it is an IT infrastructure, if I upgrade that to 5G, so I just replace it using 5G technology. 5G technology will allow me to reduce the number of IT systems that exist in the building. So here you have your building management system or building automation system, and you probably have wired voice and wired internet or IT. You have wireless voice and a wireless internet. So that's 5 networks right there. You probably have another network that is used for video, if you do training and that sort of thing, or video conferencing, and so on. And so it turns out that each one of those networks has to be supported. And for the government, that means that they're paying anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of their staff or contractors. Well, if you replace those networks with one 5G network that can do the work of 6 to 8 or more, the amount of savings goes up. So the one example I gave, where the savings goes up from $5 million to $70 million a year, that kind of savings means that you're now building a network in the building, and we believe that that network will be optimized with 5G RF technology, the same RF technology that's used in all the warfighter applications. And what that means then is that the savings that will come about from that would skyrocket, and that's why we think that Coffee County can actually pay for CHIPS 1 by itself just from ESPCs and EPCs. ESPCs are federal, energy savings performance contracts. EPCs are state, and they're, in terms of legislation, each state has EPC legislation that exactly mirrors the ESPC. The money that goes into modernizing that infrastructure comes from private sources, and that the ESCOs just have to guarantee the savings. You can do that in every state of the union, which means that every state of the union then would become a state that would be buying gallium nitride from Coffee County. Next slide. Okay, so this one, this is the last slide. We talked about the problem of training people. I mean, people have lives. A bunch of them live in different cities. How do you train them? So this is an image. If you go to the internet today, you can click a link for this Apple Vision Pro. That's that new headgear that they just came up with last year. And you really need to go see that, because you know, if you ever go to a control room where they have a bunch of different monitors, you just put those glasses on and everything is right there, and you can make it room size. That's the way it feels. But you don't have all the screens on the wall. Well, you'll see the apps there, and what can happen is that anyone who is using the Apple Vision Pro can select any of those apps. They can send messages, they can look at photos, they can watch television, so on and so forth. And now if you click the button again, this is a new app. What is that one? That's a gallium nitride flight simulator. Those folks that are up there in the upper right-hand corner are actually working in a physical semiconductor clean room. You can teach people how to do that, how to adjust the knobs, how to operate all of the equipment using this technology. And they can use it wherever they are, from their living rooms. It's their own personal gallium nitride flight simulator. It gives them real-world experience. And what happens is they would take the training, there would be training modules, you pay them. And you pay them based on how they score in each of the modules. If you get an A, you get top dollar. You get a B, you get a little less. You get a C, you get whacked in half. But it's a fun thing to do, because the experience that you're getting in your living room, in your classroom, wherever you are, is identical to the experience that you would have if you were actually in the facility. And what that means is you can start training people from all over the country to come and work here.
So it's hands-on training.
It's hands-on, but it's virtual.
Right.
Exactly. It's just like the flight simulators today. Now, and by the way, in the flight simulator, so you actually do get like, you get a joystick and that sort of thing. And so you'd have haptics. That is to say that, you know, if you have worn your watch, if you're getting directions to go someplace, and when you get near to where you need to make a turn, it vibrates, and so on. So that lets you know that you need to be prepared to make a left or a right turn. Well, you would take these classes, and you would have a glove, and you would have a helmet with sensors, so that when you're making adjustments in the process and optimizing the yield, you get the feeling of actually being there. And this revolutionizes, we believe, education for the semiconductor workforce, and it makes it fun. So that's it. I'm done.
Pretty impressive.
We have no money. Broke. But we're still going to scale the cliff until we get an answer, thumbs up or down, from the Department of Commerce. The thing that, so I had to break the news to a few people a few weeks ago, and Pete, when I told him that we were broke, but we were still working at it, every company, you saw that list of companies, everyone said, we're going to hang in there and see this thing through until we get an answer. And because of the impact that this project would have on rural America and HBCUs, that's something that Americans need to see, coast to coast. Americans need to see that. And so we're going to force the issue. Either, you know, the federal government is going to look at it and say, we think this is something that we have to do, or they're going to say, no, we're not going to do it, in which case we're going to tell everybody they said no. So that's it.
I appreciate you coming in and reassuring us that our efforts weren't wasted, so.
They were not.
Thank you very
And
much.
they seem to be so optimistic.
Well, and
The
let
last
me,
few days have been very educational for me
good.
and helpful to me to just reassure myself I'm not wasting a taxpayer's money.
Well, let me say this. All the members of the team, because they're not getting paid, they're spending company money at risk. And they feel the same way, that it's a risk worth taking. I am not getting paid because the money never came through. So, you know, at midnight, this thing goes poof, and I'm in, you know, sweatshirt and whatnot. And, you know, my wife and I decided that this was something that was important to do. And it's important because the way that the plan is, and let me just tell you the way the financing works. Because a lot of folks, Greg Varnberg, with whom my name is Mud, because we didn't come through with the money that we led him to believe that was in the bag. If we get the PMT issued, he then goes out to the bond market and to the equity market, and he starts raising money. Well, the equity money that he's looking for is $500 million or more. And when those whales come in with that kind of money, they want control. Part of what we're trying to do is to put in place an operating entity. And we've worked with Brian Cave. We have a plan for providing stock to board members and senior executives and senior scientists, but also to employees. And we want to make this something that the folks who are doing the work will own. We, ICS, owns nothing. And actually right now, as you probably heard from Rowdy, EMP Shield could pull the plug. So if the PMT is actually announced, EMP Shield could come in and say, you know, we're not going to run this thing, but since you guys didn't come up with the money, if there's a negotiation that has to be done with the whales, and they decide they want to, you know, reward us for the risk we've taken up to this point, we'll take that reward. And my attitude is, you should. You should.
Thanks, Carl.
Do you have Do you have anything you want to share with us in executive session that we need to know or should know?
I've kind
or-
of spilled my guts, so it's out there now.
Okay.
I think what's gonna happen is that, I'm just hoping that before you can get it on the website, we get to talk to Toland.
Yeah.
And then he'll see it after the fact, but then he'll know that, oh man, everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me, appreciate
We
your
talked
time.
about September the 16th, been a date, in fact, it was a date a year ago.
Yeah,
We're
that's
into the second year, but, you know, fiscal year of the government, it ends September 30th.
September 30.
Is that, does that kind of give you an idea that maybe that decision will happen before September 30th this year?
Yeah, that's what we're shooting
That's
for.
definitely your target, isn't it?
That's our target, but we want to see if we can't extract the PMT a lot sooner than that, because we still got to go through the due diligence. And we've got to prepare for that. That's going to be a steep hill to climb, because if we have to hit the ball out of the park for that.
So the PMT, if you're awarded that, I mean, it means no money, but it means that the government is actively looking at you.
Exactly. And everybody out there
Right.
will know about it. That becomes national news.
Good luck.
Luck?
No, no, no. I just said good luck. I mean, there's gotta be some luck there.
Well, actually, we feel strongly the Lord knows what He's doing. And if this is something that He's in favor of, we'll see each other at the top of the cliff. If not, we'll just roll around on each other. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
Carl.
much.
Thank you.
I think, Wade, when the meeting's over, if you and Carl and I can talk for 30 seconds, I think.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna assume that since this is the only topic, we can just adjourn this.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that can be talked about, so unless there's more, unless anybody has any.
I do not have any questions. All I can say is between yesterday with Burns and Mac coming in and having the discussion we had yesterday and Carl coming in today, that hopefully the taxpayers know our efforts are not wasted.
They're not.
And what might also be helpful, and I just thought of this, you're actually Dr. Wyatt, right?
That's
So maybe a little bit about your background, training and experience to,
sure.
for those who don't know.
So I'm, let's see, I grew up in Baltimore. My mama's folks are from South Carolina, not far from Columbia, South Carolina, a little place called Pelion. I was a knucklehead when I was a student, barely got out of high school with a C, and ran into a bunch of cliff climbers and decided, you know what, I want to go to MIT. And the problem was that I had performed so badly on my ACT and SAT that the only two schools that would take me are North Carolina A&T and Tennessee State. So I went to Tennessee State because that allowed me to save enough money to go to college. I had enough for one quarter. And halfway through the quarter, I had eaten up all my meal tickets. So I worked in the cafeteria for food. And at the end of the quarter, I got hauled into the dean's office, and I thought, okay, this is it. And he said, you know what, you have straight A's. That had never happened to me before. I could hardly believe it. He says, and we're going to give you a scholarship. And that was the last time I paid for my education. So I finished at Tennessee State and got accepted at MIT. And did my master's and PhD in electrical engineering there. And then when I came out, I started working at AT&T on compound semiconductors. So for me, this is kind of like full circle, back to compound semiconductors. And, I've spent the better part of the last 40 years. I'm an old guy at 73, so I've been at it a while. And when Greg called us to tell us about this project, I thought it was crazy because nobody gets into semiconductors without already having semiconductor experience in fabs. But then when we learned that this was gallium nitride, we realized maybe it's not quite so crazy. And that's how I got involved. We were originally involved as customers. We were going to be buying gallium nitride for the ESPC and EPC applications. And then as things worked out, we started talking to DOD, met with them 3 times. They expressed their interest in this project, and we were asked to give it a good look, and decided to make the transition from being just customers to being servants. That's how we got involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck in Topeka.
Thank you.
Well-
See if you can straighten them out.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We've
The next step up the cliff,
Right, exactly.
and we'll go there side by side.
Exactly.
I'm not gonna shield for you.
Well, we've all wished you good luck, but as a wise man I know told me, you make your own luck. And I think you've got the mindset to do that, and that's what I feel everyone here has tried to do, is
Good.
step out on a cliff.
Well, I admire your courage. This isn't happening anywhere else in the country. And the risk that you've taken, it's kind of how all of the semiconductor factories in the U.S. got started. You had some people that had a vision, they took a risk, and staked their claim. That's not unusual for Americans, and some lost, but then some succeeded.
We're a pretty unique county, though. We've got commissioners before us who put the money aside to make this possible, and we owe a huge thank you to them. In my mind. That made this, that they knew something be coming down the pike, that, we're a pretty unique county with our Wolf Creek and other things we've got going for us, and those people had the insight to set that money back for a project like this.
Good. All right, well, thank you all, I appreciate it.
We will adjourn at 10:47.